With Bungie splitting from Activision, it raises a lot of questions regarding the future of Destiny. Will we get a Destiny 3 or oncoming expansions of Destiny 2? If we do get a sequel, how do we avoid some of the problems we faced in the past? Welcome back, Guardians, to another Embrace Destiny video. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to look at the transition from Destiny 1 to 2 and the current situation the franchise is in, and propose some ideas as to how we could best move forward. Now, I am not a games developer, I do not work at Bungie, and do not claim to know the first thing about developing this franchise. But I have some ideas, and my own perspective as a player. And I am making this video to fuel the conversation and get some ideas out there ready for criticism. Bungie has been listening to the community better than ever before, starting back at the Bungie Summit, and while games shouldn't be made by committee, different perspectives are often refreshing and helpful, which is my intent. So Bungie released Destiny 2 as per their contract with Activision. Here they were contractually obligated to release a new title, so they did. The company took the opportunity to move away from last generation consoles, introduce the game to PC, and make some design changes, the most specific being weapon slots, ammo economy, and subclasses. Now since then, after a lot of feedback and a strongly negative reception of the initial experience, Bungie has modified many of those systems, bringing back 6v6 in the Crucible, adding new subclass variants, and changing many features to be more in line with the end of Destiny 1. While much of the community may have originally questioned the idea of a sequel, I will say that it was the smart move, not just the legal imperative. Just moving away from last-gen consoles would have been enough justification for me. And while Bungie has reverted many of the changes they made in Destiny 2 Year 1, I still argue that the game we have now is far and away better than what we have ever had. It's an addition, with lessons from the past going toward an improved gaming experience. Looking ahead, we face a lot of questions about where the franchise is going and how. They say those who do not learn from the past are doomed to repeat it, so with that in mind, let's look at some challenges Bungie faced with Destiny 2, and propose ideas to help in going forward. Starting the game fresh. Sequels are tough because they require a delicate balance of the familiar and unfamiliar. Ideally, you want more of the same great stuff you had, but not so much as to be repetitive and unoriginal. In Destiny, you have the added problem that Guardians generally become more powerful as you progress through the content. By the end of Destiny 1, we had killed several gods. How then can you justify having players start fresh at the beginning of the sequel? Destiny 2 had some good ideas. With the tower and vault destroyed, the Traveler caged, it provided in-game reasons why characters were starting anew. Yes, you may be a veteran, but your gear was lost and your powers subdued and changed. If you're familiar with the Mass Effect series, the transition between the original and second game followed a similar idea in a way. However, the main downside here relates to our second problem, that of balancing returning versus new players. Rewarding and acknowledging the commitment of returning players while also giving a fair and fun experience to new players. It has been shown that sequels can be very successful at bringing new people to a franchise. Generally, things start fresh with a sequel, so while there is some explanation/exposition needed to catch up, a sequel is often seen as more inviting to a player than an expansion on a current game. Rumor has it this is the thinking behind Activision's game release schedule. When making a sequel, you have to balance the first problem we listed along with this second one, and unfortunately I think Bungie made a few missteps here. Without access to our gear, many veteran players felt like their time and commitment to the base game was unrewarded. The only things which carried over were a few emblems and some veteran dialogue. In Bungie's defense, they not only had to balance veterans versus new players, but they also made big changes to how the game worked, and bringing old gear would likely have broken the game and or limited the creation team severely. Now that the game is a blended version between Destinies 1 and 2, we find many exotics returning. Many are enjoying the new changes to the weapons and the interesting exotic quests, but there are those who are annoyed by having to work for the same gear twice. So, let's recap our problems. Starting the sequel fresh, even for veteran players, and rewarding committed players, but making balance for new players. Now, I would like to propose some ideas I believe could help. First, I believe the major step for this franchise is through a new game. Yes, we've got the annual pass running now, and maybe another big expansion after that, So far, the game has followed the cutscene at the end of the base game, meaning we should be visiting the Dreadnought soon, maybe facing the Dark Ships in the next installment. Personally, I believe that the franchise may be moving to a new game, not only to give the developers a fresh start in their design, but also to ready themselves for the next generation console, Xbox 2 or whatever it's going to be called, PlayStation 5. So assuming we get a new game, and hopefully has a more inclusive design and title than Destiny 3, maybe Destiny Universe or something, how do we avoid the two problems seen with Destiny 2? First, while a new game, I would suggest that Destiny 3 carries over many of the design choices and lessons from previous games. Destiny 2 originally was such a departure from Destiny 1 that it almost felt like the franchise had taken a step backward, reverted. There have been a lot of fantastic additions to this game, from our new weapon slot system, which I would argue gives better variety than before, new subclass types, faster game tuning, enjoyable live events, better Eververse handling and balance, and the annual pass providing an excellent, slow, but ongoing pace of content. So in the new game, I hope to see many of these design philosophies carry over, show that the lessons learned will enforce positive design, and give the players confidence that we will not regress. Unless there's a strong reason to do otherwise, I would also argue that all of the worlds from Destinies 1 and 2 should return. Now the biggest challenge here is making both the graphics and mechanics of these places align and updated for Destiny 3, but I believe it is in the company's and franchise's best interest. Frankly, I do not know how difficult this would be. It could be nearly impossible to port the worlds over, requiring them to be remade, thus kind of a waste of time and effort. I hope this is not the case, but I admit it is a strong possibility. Personally, I think that the next version of this game should be one large universe where everything comes together. Some may ask, why should I get Destiny 3 when it just has elements copied from Destinies 1 and 2? Well, the idea is to build on what was done, not just forget it, and not to focus only on nostalgia. Perhaps the worlds do not come back all at once. Perhaps they are drip-fed like the annual pass. Perhaps they come back in big expansions, but either way, simply their return would not be enough to be the focus of an expansion. They should be updated to fit the new game and system, and there could be changes so as to not appear as a simple copy-paste job. Or bring them back almost exactly, but give us different things to do to show a developing universe. I know this point asks for a lot, but I believe this would help with the two challenges I mentioned before. Next, story-wise. My idea involves the Guardian waking up on the moon of Europa. Far from the traveler, the player finds themselves with little light and few weapons. As you explore, you discover that mysterious forces out there are limiting your light's potential somehow. There are ample ways that this could go, from the darkness encroaching, the creatures listed in the Drifter's Gambit lore book, many in-game reasons why you're not starting as the all-powerful Godslayer. For new players, this is no problem, since you expect to start fresh. For returning players, this makes sense, and is similar to Destiny 2's approach. As you explore, maybe you encounter some villages, deep space colonies. If you're a returning player, perhaps they have heard of you, rumors of the battles of the inner system. Your titles carry over, your emblems carry over, especially since they have no reason not to. They won't break the game. Now the biggest challenge here concerns returning exotics. Veteran players will not be too happy if they lose everything, or even if they get it all back but have to put in a lot of work. New players won't be happy if veterans have crazy advantages, making the game impossible to enjoy from day one. So how do we handle this? Well, similar to what we have now, we have a system where you can earn the gear back, but the path differs depending on your experience in the franchise. If you are carrying your character over, then the idea is that you learned from Cade and stashed your gear throughout the system. You lost your gear once in the tower, you're not going to let that happen again. So as you play the game, you either discover your gear or have an easy quest to find it. If you're a new player, perhaps you just discover the quest, which may involve a little more effort since you are new. So here's an example. Perhaps after helping people in the Europa colony, they direct you to a strange energy reading or a strange symbol they have seen in the hills or surrounding areas. When you approach, you find a small army of enemies with supplies and such, and one of those supplies is emitting the energy reading. Your ghost identifies it as a Weapon Foundry's cache from Earth. Taking out the enemies, you have access to the cache. If you are a returning player, then your ghost says he knows how to open it. Boom, exotic. This would be similar to the Cade Stash mission in Destiny 1. If you're a new player, then maybe you have to do some work, collect some materials, in order to crack the case and access the exotic. In Destiny 2, we had new exotics basically gifted to us right away, leaving little to chase, and we have returning exotics with quests, putting everyone on equal, often reliant on RNG footing. The idea here is that returning players get their gear back, and they get it back with less effort than the new player. At the same time, the new player isn't being punished, but given the same reward with a little more effort involved. There are many variants of this, of course. Perhaps as we discover more, maybe we meet some familiar faces. Maybe we encounter Spider on the Tangled Shore, who found one of your caches and puts you through a bunch of tasks and such to, quote, earn his loyalty, and get your gear back. Personally, I would love if our Guardian could discover more about the outer colony Lady Aphrodite mentioned in Destiny 1. For those unfamiliar, Lady Aphrodite is an Iron Lord, who returned to the Iron Temple at the end of Rise of, you guessed it, Iron. She became the new Iron Banner vendor, and she would often hint that she had spent time in the outer system with people who learned to use the light not as a weapon. So perhaps you meet her in the outer solar system. Perhaps she has exotic gear you can earn either through earning her trust as a new player or through an easier effort as a returning Guardian she has heard of. This idea extends to the last city. Unless something drastic were again to happen to the city, I would imagine it would be much the same way we left it as the end of Destiny 2. I hope that entering the city has minor effects depending on your status as a returning or new character. If you are returning, then you may be faced with smiling faces, dialogue from the Vanguard, maybe access to your old stash, similar to my earlier suggestions. And again, if you're new, maybe you can earn gear through quests, and the Vanguard in the city likely to trust you as you are a Guardian. Now there's one really interesting idea here which departs a little from everything we have discussed. This is something new and something exciting. The ability to play as a different race. There have been strong rumors, at least as far back as the adventure on Titan in Destiny 2, that we could maybe have the option to play as an Elixni, a Fallen. So how would this work? Well, for the most part, I would say that playing as an Elixni would follow the same path as a new player. Depending on how RPG the new game goes, there could be variant dialogue, people treating you differently, things like this. Personally, I hope that we do get this option, and I hope that it allows for some variant options regarding Spider and maybe Varix. Different lines of dialogue at least, but different quests or different ways to approach quests could be really interesting. Perhaps, as a Fallen, you know the language of your people, and your ghost is able to pick up on things in quests with this knowledge. Here we go for minor game variation design, changing the approach only a little for uniqueness. Either way, dialogue at the least should be a little different, allowing us to be drawn into certain characters and pushed away from others. A Fallen Guardian in the last city would cause a lot of confusion. I suggest that when your character enters the city for the first time, that they have to undergo a strike or some kind of battle where they prove themselves to the Vanguard that they are a Guardian by saving people and using their light. This would work even if you are a new player, a Fallen, or even a long-lost Guardian. Finally, I want to talk about new abilities, specifically darkness and variant light powers. There have been hints and rumors that we may have access to darkness abilities in the next game. As always, I would hope for an in-game reason to explain this. Perhaps the shard of the Traveler has become corrupted, perhaps we are learning from the Hive. My suggestion is that if we start far from the Traveler in the beginning of the game, surrounded by mysterious creatures and the soon-to-invade dark ships, my thinking is that our connection to the light may be skewed, and we learn to pick up some darkness tricks in the outer system. I'm not sure we will get a new darkness-based subclass, but either way I think that whatever we get will be an extension of what we have now. I'm not sure how far we will get from the "you are a hero" philosophy that the game goes through, but assuming that it stays on course, I think it'll be similar to the last word quest in Destiny 2. You are following a path to learn to confront the darkness, and you are embracing every tool and weapon you can use to that end. Finally, wanted to touch on some light variant powers. As mentioned earlier, Lady Aphrodite said she had spent time with an outer colony who has learned to use their light not as a weapon. I think it would be great if our characters met some of these people and picked up a thing or two. Truth is, we would not stray too far from the first-person shooter, looter-shooter mentality. Whatever abilities we learn will ultimately be put to use in combat. But there's an opportunity to add a little something extra, making a point about the light and guardians and offering some slight alternatives to gameplay. Say we meet Aphrodite in the outer system, and we meet light bearers using their light in non-traditional ways. Maybe they are with the Nine, and they use darkness and light indiscriminately, neutral to the constant fight in the universe. There are many very creative, but maybe too creative ways that this could go. The point here is to give the player a new ability and give them an interesting way to learn about and use the abilities. After we meet these people and have a single quest to learn our new trick, similar to the subclass quests in The Taken King, maybe we can continue to use these abilities in and out of combat. Out of combat, perhaps we can help the people of the last city or the outer colony using these abilities. This is similar, by the way, to the kind of chores that you can do on the farm. Do you remember the farm? Well, all around the farm there are a couple of different spots where if you perform certain functions, you will gain a buff. You know, running on the water wheel, kind of inspecting the territory of the farm will give you a buff. And I like the idea that maybe we will have little chores like this that we could do that will give us experience and items and materials, and is another way to be a guardian rather than just shooting everything all the time. Anyway, those are a bunch of ideas and a little bit of rambling, so let's try to bring this all together. Transitioning to a new game through its sequel was very challenging for the Destiny franchise. The game faced the issues of needing to start fresh while balancing the player base. Returning players felt shafted by the loss of their gear and with little acknowledgement of their commitment. Finally, many felt as if too many assets and activities were left behind. In attempting to tackle these issues, I have made the following suggestions. Make a new game, but bring as much as possible from the previous games together. This allows integration with next-generation consoles and makes one big Destiny universe to explore. This also allows exotics to continue to remain functional and return to the game with little tuning. Emblems and titles would carry over and give respect to player commitment. I suggest starting the game in deep space, far from the traveler, with low light and power relevant to the situation. Perhaps have the general flow of the game extend from the outer system inward to the last city, with the player gaining power along the way, but so too is the darkness. The standoff in the last city could be one big battle between light and dark, with the outcome not being exactly certain, leaving room for expansions. My overly ambitious idea, by the way, would be use the rotating Dreaming City technique, but have the fight between the Traveler and Dark ships literally moving to different planets, week to week, like the Flashpoint. This is a crazy and big idea, probably not worth the effort to remodel each of the areas, but I think it would be great to see a kind of evolving world and have a conflict that is both omnipresent but ebbs and flows. Next, have characters find and earn exotics differently depending on if they are a returning player or not. Returning players are able to find their old stashes over time, find their loot. New players may find the stash but need to work a little to open the chest. Have variations of people reacting to you based on your character status. If you are new, maybe you have to earn their trust. If you are returning, maybe you have to work with or against their bias toward you. And if you're an Elixir or Fallen, both. Finally, introduce new abilities as a result of the changing universe. Darkness powers from the Dark Powers Rising, do what you gotta do to win. New light abilities could come from characters wanting to use the light in a different way, but a player can choose to use them in or out of battle, such as helping people with little quests. Whew, okay, that's a lot. My apologies here for some of the rambling. I did my best to approach this through a problem-solution reasoning standpoint, but I know that some of my ideas are just a little too wild. I hope that this gives some food for thought to you and the community. The basic thing to take away here is that I really hope Bungie is aware of the two problems I mentioned earlier and are working toward ensuring that they don't face these challenges in the future of their franchise. While Destiny is in a great spot, there is still a darkness, a shadow, looming from year one of Destiny 2. With Activision not in play, there is no telling which way Bungie will go. I just hope that they are listening and working to respect the time of the player base. While they should be free to make whatever game they want, I hope they revisit some of the problems with Destiny 2 in order to make a better way forward with the future of the franchise. Thank you all very much for watching. As always, links to my Twitter and Twitch streams are below. I stream most nights around 4 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. GMT. This channel has grown really quickly in the last few months, and I am very, very thankful to all of you and all of your time. I'm working on a very special video right now, which I'm hoping to have ready soon, maybe, hopefully by the time I reach 100 subscribers. Thank you all very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye now.